In episode 50, titled Quick Recap, Assessment to Authorization, we take a rapid but careful walk from first planning conversations to the moment an authorization decision lands. The goal is to stitch the entire journey into one coherent narrative you can replay whenever a new system begins its trek. Think of this as a high-fidelity flight path. You start with the checklist, taxi with discipline, and take off only when the airspace is genuinely clear. The destination is not paperwork. It is a defensible, operational decision that leadership can stand behind. When teams see how the pieces interlock, the path from planning to authorization stops feeling like a maze and starts looking like an engineered route with clear waypoints and predictable markers. A strong assessment begins with a plan that names roles, timelines, communications, and evidence expectations in plain terms. Assign a single coordinator, define domain owners, and agree which channels handle intake, scheduling, and clarifications so no request lands in a void. Set a realistic calendar that respects change windows and freeze periods and publish it where everyone can see dependencies. Make evidence expectations explicit, formats, file name patterns, versioning, and authentication levels, so the first artifact looks like the 50th. Planning is not bureaucracy, it is risk control. When roles, time boxes, and handoff rules are visible, the assessment runs on rails, and late-night improvisation becomes the rare exception rather than the default habit. Clarity on scope and assumptions is the guardrail that keeps the project honest. Work with stakeholders to draw boundaries around systems, data classes, environments, and interconnections, and write down not just what in, but also what is out. Attach assumptions that would matter later, such as time synchronization sources, representative datasets, or temporary architecture quirks that will be retired during the window. Ask sponsors to confirm the statement in writing so an agreed baseline exists when questions arise. This alignment saves weeks because sampling, interviews, and technical steps all derive from the same map. When scope is clean and assumptions are transparent, the narrative that follows will make sense to readers who were not in the room when choices were made. Daily coordination with the third-party assessment organization, TPAO, keeps friction small and momentum high. A short stand-up with a crisp agenda, what landed, what is blocked, what changes today, prevents drift and allows quick schedule moves when surprises hit. Use a single intake door for requests and updates so nothing fragments across chat threads and inboxes. Announce maintenance and incidents the day they occur and propose retest plans rather than waiting to be asked. Coordination is not about pleasing the assessor, it is about telling the truth quickly and keeping the evidence sequence intact. When teams behave as partners, the assessment reads like a continuous story rather than a stack of loosely related events. Producing a Security Assessment Report, SAR, is where raw observations become a decision-ready narrative. Write clear themes that synthesize what patterns matter, then present each finding with evidence, impact, and likelihood in language that operational leaders can understand. Include replication steps so reviewers can validate conclusions without insiders on the call, and align severity to a consistent rubric to prevent priority inflation. The SAR should answer 4 questions for every reader: what was tested, what was found, why it matters, and how it can be addressed. When the SAR reads like a structured explanation rather than a scrapbook of screenshots, the path from discovery to action shortens dramatically. Triaging findings and populating the plan of actions and milestones, POA&M, translates analysis into accountable work. Validate evidence to remove false positives, merge duplicates into root cause clusters, and write risk statements that name assets, impacts, and realistic likelihoods. Create one POA&M entry per weakness with a unique identifier, owner, milestones, and target dates proportionate to severity. Record interim mitigations when immediate fixes are not feasible, and be candid about residual risk. The POA&M becomes your operational ledger. Anyone should be able to look at it and know what is open, how it will be proven closed, and when proof is due. Precision here is what turns "we are working on it" into "this risk is under control." Managing deviations carefully recognizes that some controls cannot be fully met right away. Define what a deviation is, a temporary, approved variance, and capture rationale, scope, duration, and compensating safeguards in a standard record. Coordinate approvals with sponsors and, when appropriate, with the TPAO so no one discovers a silent exception during review. Set expirations with automated reminders and hold mini-reviews to confirm safeguards still operate and ownership remains active. The discipline is simple. Exceptions exist in daylight, shrink over time, and never outlive their purpose. Deviation management done well does not weaken governance. It proves the program can flex without losing its grip on risk. Packaging parseable scan artifacts keeps automation and auditors aligned. Deliver raw results for machines, human summaries for orientation, and explicit proof that authenticated checks ran where required. Preserve authoritative identifiers, inventory IDs, IPs, host names, and timestamps with time zones, so joins and roll-ups never rely on guesswork. Record tool versions, policies, and profiles used to prevent accidental changes in visibility from being misread as genuine risk movement. Verify that coverage counts match scope, hash and sign archives for integrity, and test imports with the receiving tools. Good packages flow into ticketing, dashboards, and evidence repositories without manual surgery, which means remediation starts sooner and reconciliations stop stealing calendar time. Understanding the authority to operate, ATO letter, its conditions, and operational commitments is where permission meets duty. Identify who authorized the system, whether the decision is an agency ATO or a joint authorization board PATO, and what conditions govern continued operation. Translate reporting cadences, remediation deadlines, and usage constraints into checklists and dashboards owned by named teams. Tie conditions to your continuous monitoring rhythm so evidence is produced on schedule without heroics. When customer teams, operations, and leadership can all recite the same conditions and dates, you avoid inadvertent violations that damage credibility and trigger unpleasant resets. Submission to the Project Management Office, PMO, is a packaging exercise that rewards meticulous consistency. Provide human-readable documents alongside Open Security Controls Assessment Language, OSCAL, packages that pass schema validation. Follow the exact checklist, file name patterns, and folder structure the portal expects. Encrypt archives, transmit keys on a separate secure channel, and include hashes so integrity can be verified. Confirm portal permissions, upload order, and acknowledgements, then mirror the submitted structure internally with immutable logs. A clean submission looks boring, in the best possible way, because everything lines up and nothing requires a clarifying chase across 5 mail threads. Communication does not end at upload. It becomes the operating rhythm for statuses, decisions, and next steps. Publish brief updates that connect findings to POA&M movement, conditions to completed evidence, and questions to named responders with response windows. Track ticket numbers and timestamps so the history of each exchange is reconstructible in minutes. Share the same facts with leadership, engineering, and customer teams using language suited to each audience but anchored to the same identifiers. Clear, prompt communication is not decoration. It is the control that keeps policy and practice synchronized when the environment changes mid-cycle. If you need a single memory hook to carry this end-to-end process in your head, use this sequence: plan, test, report, remediate, package, authorize. Plan with roles, calendars, and evidence expectations that make the first day look like the last. Test with methods and samples that reflect real risk, not theater. Report with an SAR that tells the truth cleanly and enables replication. Remediate with a POA&M that assigns owners, sets dates, and records proof. Package, scan, and document artifacts so machines and humans agree on the state of the world. Authorize with eyes open to conditions and with continuous monitoring wired into daily work. It is easy to remember because each word cues a concrete activity and a tangible artifact. As the recap closes, the lesson is that speed and credibility come from the same place: disciplined traceability. Each step points at the next with stable identifiers, consistent dates, and evidence that can be retrieved without storytelling. When people join midstream, they can see what happened, why it mattered, and how closure will be proven. When auditors or authorizing officials ask a hard question, you do not scramble, you link. That is the mark of a mature program, decisions that stand because the underlying record is coherent and alive. In conclusion, the recap is complete. and the path from assessment to authorization should feel actionable, not abstract. You have a flight path that begins with a plan, checks reality with testing, tells a clear story in the SAR, turns findings into owned work in the POA&M, packages data that flows, and lands an authorization with conditions that live in your monitoring cadence. The next action is straightforward and useful. State 3 learned practices you will adopt immediately for your program, one for planning discipline, one for evidence quality, and one for communication cadence. So the recap becomes a change in how the next system is run rather than a pleasant memory. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.